Hello, and welcome to Banjos, Strings, and Drinking Gourds, How American Culture Came to Be, the podcast of the Frontier Culture Museum of Virginia. I'm Alex.
And I'm Rachel. Today we are joined by Mark Mazzochi, who you've heard before, and Mark has a continuation of a previous podcast.
Yes, today Mark is going to be talking about the Haitian Revolution and how that is very significant in the development of the United States.
All right, so today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the revolution in Haiti. And this is a continuation of my earlier talk about the transatlantic slave trade. For Haiti, there are three major pieces that lead to the revolution in Haiti. The first is a pretty common desire of most of the colonies in the New World seeking to gain their independence from their European founders. In the case of Haiti, it's primarily going to be against the French. The second part is going to talk about how the French Revolution specifically impacted Haiti. And the third part is going to be talking about the slave revolt and how the enslaved peoples of Haiti got their independence. But before we get into that, let me give a little bit of background about the island itself. So Haiti is in the Caribbean on an island called Hispaniola, and it was discovered by Christopher Columbus in 1492. And when the Spanish first discovered it, they did put down a small settlement on the island, which was wiped out by the local Indian groups there. In 1493, the Spanish returned and set up their first permanent and successful colony on Hispaniola. By 1504, the Taino population, the Indian population, had been conquered by the Spanish. And by 1514, the first enslaved Africans are brought to Hispaniola, replacing the declining Taino population, primarily in mining gold and silver. Now, the Spanish economics in the period really was looking for gold, silver, and precious gems. And they did find some of this in Haiti, and on Hispaniola, I should say. But while they are there, they will also turn to other processes to try to make some money on the island. This will include sugar, tobacco, cocoa, coffee, indigo, and eventually cotton plantations will also start being formed on the island. In 1697, Hispaniola was divided, with half of the island continuing to be ruled by the Spanish. That part is now the Dominican Republic, and the rest of the island being taken over by the French. That is going to become the nation of Haiti. With the French takeover of Haiti, production of sugar begins to explode, and with it, an increase in the importation of enslaved Africans onto the island. By the middle of the 18th century, Hispaniola, primarily Haiti, and the island of Jamaica, ruled by the British, are the largest producers of sugar in the world. The population for the island of Haiti is really divided into three different parts. The first part is the primarily French population, and that population is further divided. There's the major landowners, and then there were the craftsmen. These craftsmen were often referred to as the little whites on the island. The second population that's important to talk about is the free black population, called the gens de couleurs libres, and the mulatto population. And then the third portion, by far the largest, was the enslaved African population. Many of these people were actually new arrivals from Africa. One of the reasons for that is that the life expectancy of working on one of the sugar plantations could vary somewhat, but typically you're looking at about somewhere between 10 and 15 years when working on the sugar plantations.
Now we're at the time where France is going to get very interesting. So how did the French Revolution affect Haiti?
All right, so to really understand how the French Revolution affects Haiti, we've got to actually take a little bit step back. We're going to talk about the United States. So in 1783, the United States wins its independence from Great Britain. And France is a major reason why the United States was able to get its independence. France supported the United States not just militarily with fleets and men, but it also helped finance much of the American cause. And because of that, it pulled France into economic debt. And this unfortunately happens with France at the same time that they are beginning to have droughts in France, causing further economic problems. So, the second issue that's going to now plague the French monarchy after the American Revolution was that of collecting taxes. The legislative branch of the French government is called the Estates General. Unlike most modern legislatures, the Estates General only had the power to raise and collect taxes. And in France's case, it had last been called in 1614. By 1780s, France did not collect enough money to easily cover all of its expenses. With all these economic problems building up, in 1789, the Estates General was called by Louis XVI in an attempt to fix France's financial problems. The Estates General is made up of 3 estates. The first estate is taken from the nobility, the second estate was taken from the clergy, and the third estate is taken from the common people. With both the nobles and the clergy often being from the same families and having the same backgrounds, they tended to vote together, overriding anything the third estate wanted to do. And that estate is what represents the majority of the French population. All right. So when the estates are called, the third estate and a couple of members from the first estate, like the Marquis de Lafayette, who had fought with the Americans in the American Revolution, begin separate meetings to try to change France from a monarchy into a republic. One of the major accomplishments to come out of this is the declarations of the rights of man and citizen. For Haiti, the 2 most significant parts to this are in opposition to each other. And those are going to be the first article and the 17th article. The first article says, men are born and remain free and of equal rights. Social distinctions may be found only upon the general good. The 17th article, however, says, property being an invaluable right and sacred right, no one can deprive of the private usage if it is not when the public necessity is legally noted, evidently requires it, and under the condition of just and prior indemnity. These 2 things are at odds with one another. And in Haiti, the complicated question becomes, do the French craftsmen and workers now have the same rights as the landowners? Do the free black and mulatto population also have equal rights? And lastly, the enslaved population, are they French citizens protected by Article 1, or are they property trapped in the institution of slavery by Article 17? All right, so in January of 1793, King Louis XVI loses control of his government, and the revolutionary leadership executes him. With his death, it plunges France into what will later on be known as the Terror. And this is where the purging of the nobility begins. This is then followed by continual purges, often by people in the legislature who are on the losing end of any internal debates, often being branded as traitors to the revolution. Probably the most important and famous of these folks is a gentleman by the name of Maximilien Robespierre, who is most responsible for the starting of the Terror, and he himself ends up being one of its later victims. This cycle continues all the way through into 1794, and this instability eventually brings to the power a dictator by the name of Napoleon Bonaparte, who will rule France from 1799 onward. The second major issue that leads to the Haitian War of Independence was common in, again, nearly in all of the Americas, the desires of the populations in the New World to govern themselves. The United States was the first of these countries, and Haiti ends up becoming the second to gain their independence. But most colonial territories in the New World will gain their independence throughout the remainder of the 19th and early 20th centuries. The details differ in every case, but a few general things tend to be the same that led to these independence movements. First was that there was a fairly large and well-established local elite that had some experience with problem solving on their local issues. The second, most of the population was either born in the colonies and was no longer from Europe itself. The third, the populations needed to be large enough that it was difficult for a European nation to send a large enough military expedition to reconquer the colony and continue to maintain those forces. The final issue that came to a head in Haiti was that of slavery. The island's population at the time of the French Revolution was about 40,000 white colonists divided between the landowners and the tradesmen, about 30,000 free blacks and mulattoes, and about 500,000 enslaved Africans. With such a large enslaved population, it's no surprise that the French colonies had a long history with slave revolts, as well as a large number of escaped slaves. These escaped slaves tended to flee into the mountainous areas on the island, and they began to make a living as subsistence farmers while avoiding recapture. When word of the French Revolution reached Haiti, it added to the discontent of the enslaved African population, as the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity were discussed, but for these people, all three were denied. In 1789, the debates in Haiti really revolved around what the French Revolution meant for the island. The arguments were the landowning whites and free blacks, who also owned land, having rights, and preventing the little whites and the mulatto craftsmen from having a say in the colonial government. In 1791, the enslaved population rose up and began an armed revolt in the northern part of the island. The rebels were divided between two main desires. The first was freedom from slavery, and the second was full recognition as French citizens. The last part for them was revenge for being enslaved in the first place and the truly harsh conditions that they were forced to live under. As fighting started in earnest, one of the primary military leaders of the rebellion was Toussaint L'Aurore. L'Aurore was nearly 50 years old when the rebellion started. He'd been born a slave, but was freed by the time of the French Revolution. He fought to end slavery, but remained committed to being French throughout much of the conflict. He embodied much of that era and is a good representation of how Haiti was seeing itself at the time. By 1793, the island of Hispaniola remained divided between the rebels and the French government. General L'Aurore ends up allying with both the British and the Spanish to try to defeat the pro-French government on the island, and thus bringing both Spanish and British forces onto the island to continue the conflict. In 1794, the government of France abolished slavery. And at the same time, General L'Aurore's allies seemed less willing to guarantee an end of slavery on the island. And by the end of the year, the Haitian freedom fighters had switched sides and had joined the French against the British and Spanish forces on Hispaniola. The Spanish withdrew in 1794, but the British continued to fight until 1797, when they were forced to withdraw entirely. By 1799, General L'Aurore had consolidated power on Haiti and had eliminated most of his domestic rivals. In 1801, France, now under the rule of Napoleon Bonaparte, began ignoring communications from Haiti and began trying to reinstitute slavery throughout its New World territories. In 1802, during a temporary peace between France and Great Britain, the French Navy was free to transport 20,000 French soldiers to Haiti and bring it back under French control. General L'Aurore was eventually captured by the French and sent to Europe. He remained in France until 1803, where he died in captivity. With L'Aurore gone, and the threat to the people of Haiti being forcibly returned to slavery by the French, the island revolted once again. It no longer sought to remain French, but instead to become an independent nation. By 1804, the fighting was over. Haiti was free from France. It was the second colony in the world to win its independence from a European country and the only slave revolt to have successfully done so. With its independence won, a long and bloody set of struggles over the island nation's fate, the victors turned their moment into a cautionary tale throughout the rest of the slave-owning world, where they massacred the remaining French population on the island, as well as the free black population. Much of the 40,000 whites and 30,000 free blacks had perished in this, or were forced to flee to places like Louisiana. They were caught between their ethics and their cultural ties to France. In the end, they were the victims from both sides of the conflict.
Now, I'm also curious, did the Haitian Revolution have anything to do with Napoleon selling the Louisiana Purchase to America?
Yes, it did. So Louisiana plays an interesting role with the entire Haitian Revolution. Some of the landowning French and their enslaved Africans were actually brought from Haiti into Louisiana, having that colony's population actually grow quite a bit. And then after the French army, about 50,000, suffered the same basic fate as the British and Spanish forces ahead of them, having disease, inconsistent supplies, and a long-standing guerrilla warfare. Ended up having the French army be defeated on the island. Napoleon decided that he needed to do two things. One, cut his losses in the New World. And second, he needed to try to generate a little bit of extra cash to help renew his war efforts. And so he decided to sell the Louisiana Territory to the American government. That ended up nearly doubling the size of the new United States and ended up opening up a lot of what we would think of as the southern territories in the Americas that has a growing slave population going forward as cotton became king in the Deep South.
And just going back, plugging another podcast we did in the past about cotton, the Haitian Revolution also is what a lot of the planters who escaped to the US introduced the crop and how to grow it to the Americans. And that just took off tremendously and made slavery grow. So the Haitian Revolution strangely made slavery grow in the United States.
The immediate consequence for Haiti was its political isolation. France remained a threat of restarting the war and returning the nation to French rule. Britain and Spain were unwilling to aid Haiti, first because they had been betrayed earlier in the fighting during the conflicts, and second for fear that the Haitian slave revolt would inspire violence and other independence movies in their own colonies. The last major nation in the New World, the United States, was also unwilling to anger the other great powers of Europe to aid Haiti, as well as being afraid of it starting a slave revolt in their own slave-owning territories. The long-term consequences of independence from France were both for its long-term prosperity declining and the threat of a successful slave rebellion through the world continuing to isolate it. In 1825, the restored monarchy in France threatened renewed violence of Haiti. They could either accept being returned to French control or they could pay reparations. To avoid further conflicts and to end the political isolation, they chose reparations. Haiti was required to pay 90 million francs to the French government in 1825 currency. This made a long-term economic impact on the country. They made their last payment to the French government in 1947. This helped plunge Haiti, once the wealthiest territory into the New World, into absolute poverty. And its poverty led to both political corruption and instability. The second long-term consequence was for the institution of slavery worldwide. With the success of Haiti's armed revolt, other slave-owning territories in the New World feared a similar uprising. The answer was to impose more restrictive measures aimed at preventing enslaved peoples from organizing. In some cases, like in Virginia, older rules were put back into place, such as enslaved peoples not being allowed to meet in groups larger than 3, or denying them the ability to learn to read or write. These laws had often been skirted around during the earlier colonial period, but after the revolution in Haiti, they were more strictly enforced. In addition to this, new laws were passed, making the life of slaves far worse, and at the same time degrading the quality of life for free blacks. It's a long and complicated legacy that comes from the revolution of Haiti, but it's one that was felt throughout the entirety of the Western Hemisphere and shaped policies all around the world. Thank you all for listening to me talk for a little bit.
Well, thank you for being on the show, Mark. And that's a great finish to our abolition series. So if you haven't heard the previous 2 episodes on abolition, be sure to go back and check those out.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to Banjo Strings and Drinking Gourds, wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode. We bring you historical episodes twice a month.
And if you're in the area, be sure to check out our 4th of July celebrations. We'll have Crockett's Western Battalion doing a revolutionary encampment and readings of the Declaration of Independence. Check out our website or Facebook page for more information. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.